Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In this episode I will be deploying an Active Directory domain controller running on Microsoft Windows Server 2019. This video was part of my series on building out an enterprise network. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and drop us a comment. Alright, so step one I've already completed. I've uploaded our ISO for server. So we're going to start by creating the virtual machine. I'm going to create a new virtual machine. I'm going to call this HQ PDC 1, primary domain controller 1. Let's see, we're going to go into Windows for the OS family, and we're going to select 2016 and later. And then we're going to click Next. We're going to select Data Store 1. I'm going to leave the defaults for the CPU, defaults for the RAM. We're going to change the disks, the hard drive to 100 gigs. And then we're going to make this in provision. I'm actually going to also add another drive that we're going to make 10 gigs and also thin provision. We're not going to use any USB, so I'm going to remove that controller. We're going to put this on SECNET AAA since this is part of the authentication. We're going to change the CD drive to data store, ISO, and 2019. Select and click Next and finish. Alright, so now that that's done, we're going to power this on and open the console. And then I'm going to click button. Alright, so the mouse for this, for me, so for some reason the mouse doesn't work very well, so I'm going to use the keyboard and hit Next. Install now. We're going to select I don't have a product key. For the domain controllers, alright, so we're going to select Standard Edition Desktop Experience. Select a, I'm going to check the I agree, click Next. I'm going to do Custom Install Advanced Only. And I'm going to select the 100 gig disk and click Next. I'm going to speed up the video during the installation. Alright, so the server is back. So we're going to assign a temporary password. And once we get remote access to the server, I will change the password and enter it in the database. So we're going to go to guess and send Control-Alt-Delete. All right. So first thing we're going to do is install the VMware tools. And we're going to start the setup. All right, I usually do a complete install. All right, we're going to click finish and reboot. All right, now that the server's back, let's try Control-Alt-End, which does not work. So we will send Control-Alt-Delete. All right, I'm going to check, do not show this again. First thing I'm going to do is set up our networking. So the IP address for this server is going to be 10.0.31.11 with Class C subnet mask and 10.0.31.1 for the default gateway. And the DNS is going to be 127.0.0.1. Click OK. We're definitely going to turn off IPv6. Click OK. Click No for network discovery. Close that. and close that. And for now, we can close this. So let's get out of that. Jump over to the firewall, and we're going to write a quick rule. For Windows updates. It's going to be interzone. Source is going to be AAA. And actually, I'm going to make this temporary rule for now. And then create an address. And the destination is WAN. Applications are going to be web browser, SSL, DNS, NTP, Windows updates, actually I think it's MS updates. We'll allow application defaults, and that should be good. We'll also create a temp rule for the management laptop. Interzone, source is going to be from management 10.0.11.10 to AAA domain controller. For now, we'll leave everything and leave the defaults. All right, we're going to jump over to NAT. Create a template here. Source zone is going to be our AAA. Destination zone is going to be our WAN. Destination interface is Ethernet 1.0. Source is going to be our domain controller. And translation, dynamic IP port, translate it. Interface. And commit. Let me just make sure we didn't forget anything. All right, so let's jump back over to the server. And while we're waiting, let's set up our Let's install the DNS and Active Directory roles. Actually, well, we can still do that later. So let's do this. So we're going to add the Active Directory domain services, add features, and then we're going to add the DNS role and install. While we're waiting, let's see if our rule is done, and it looks like it's nearly done. All right, I'm going to speed this part up. All right, it looks like our roles have finished installing. So let's jump over to DNS and let's click that. Alright, so we're going to, let me just take a quick look at these settings. So we're going to add a couple forwarders. And then we're going to create our zone. The zone I'm creating is SECNetwork.org. I'm going to allow non-secure and secure dynamic updates. This will change into allow only secure when the server is promoted. I'm going to create a reverse lookup zone as well. And it's going to be 10.0. And I'm also going to do allow. Alright, so before I move on to anything else, I am going to rename the server. So we're going to call this HQ PDC1. Click OK. And restart. Okay, so now we're going to send a Control-Alt-Delete. All right, so okay, so I'm going to check DNS, make sure I have ability to look up. Okay, and it looks like I can. So we're gonna minimize that, and then we're gonna go into updates. Check for updates. And while this is running, I want to check our monitor and just make sure there aren't any denies from the domain controller out to the internet. And so far it looks like it's working without issue. And I can see updates coming in. So I'm going to let this run, and I will be back once the updates have finished installing. Alright, so the updates are finished. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is enable remote desktop. Alright. Alright, so we can cancel out of this. And then we're going to log into 10.0.31.11. We're going to log in with the administrator account and our password. Alright, we're going to say yes. Okay. Okay, so we are going to promote the server to a domain controller. We're going to add a new forest. We're going to call this secnetwork.org. Click next. And I'm going to generate a password from the password database for the recovery. I'm sorry, for the directory service restore mode. And we're going to click next. We're going to type in the administrator account and the password. And then we're going to click next. Alright, so we're going to change the NetBIOS domain to SECNET. And then we're going to click next. And there is a step that I still need to do, and that is disk management. We're going to bring this disk online, initialize the disk, create a new simple volume, drive E, and finish. Alright, and now I'm going to change the path to the E drive and click next. Next. And install. And the server will automatically reboot once this is finished. So I will speed up until we're back into the server. Okay, so it looks like we are back in after the promotion. Let's take a quick look. Alright, so far so good. Let's bring up DNS as well. Okay, so it still hasn't finished replication. This should happen automatically, although we could change it manually, but I want to give it a chance to update on its own. Alright, so we have a pointer. Let's take a look at sites and services. Okay, so I'm going to start in here. First thing I'd like to do is rename the site. So this is going to be HQ. And then we're going to add in our subnet, which is going to be 10.0.0.0/16. And just add in the default query policy. Alright, so we're good there. So let's take a quick look here. Alright, so we're good there. So I'm done with sites and services. Alright, so let's start creating the OU structure. So first we're going to create our root, which is going to be SECNET. And I'm going to create the rest and speed up. Okay, so we have the basic OU structure laid out. So at this time I'm going to create a admin account for me. And for admin accounts I'm going to do -admin and then click next. And click next, and so for now we'll just add my account to domain admins. And so we're going to add to domain admins, schema admins, and enterprise admins. Now, normally you would only be in the schema admins group if you're making changes to the schema admin, which in later videos I will be. So once I'm done with the basic build out, I'll end up removing myself from this group. And the display name we're going to change to specify this as an admin account. Alright, so we have our admin account, and while I'm at it, I'm going to create a normal user account. We'll just do EHJ and then type in our password. And down the line, I will be enabling two-factor authentication once I build out the public key infrastructure certificate authorities. So that's going to be it for this part. And so let's just double check our DNS. See if it had a chance to replicate these zones. Alright, still not updated. We'll give it some more time. Alright, so what I'm going to do right now is... Alright, so what I'm going to do now is connect to the domain controller from here. 10.0.31.11 $. Alright, and go to users, administrator, and desktop. And I'm going to transfer some files over. Let's make sure everything came over, and it looks like it did. And so we're going to jump back over here. Extract our group policies. So I pre-wrote the group policies so I don't have to sit here for hours creating them. So we have the templates, the beginning policies created already. Alright, so let's open up group policy. Alright, so let's just start creating our policies here. The first one I'm going to create is SECNET mandatory. Policy version 1.0. SECNET desktop policy version 1.0. SECNET user policy version 1.0. SECNET ATP removable storage policy version 1.0. SECNET PDC PDC. Let me do that one later. Let's do this. Let's do import settings. Okay, I just wanted to verify the name. All right, so we're going to import the default domain policy first. And that is successful. Import the defaults domain policy. And we'll do SECNET 1.0. Import settings. And keep going down the list. So this policy has some objects that I need to go in and update. So I'll take a look at that in a minute. So this is our removable storage policy. And then our mandatory policy. All right, so next we're going to do SECNET, NTP, PDC, policy version 1.0, and then we'll do SECNET, NTP, PDC, policy version 1.0. And last, the user policy. Okay, so step one is going to be to import the WMI queries. I'm sorry, the WMI filters. Which I have put in here. Import. Let's import the second one. So what I like to do is, if I link, actually before I link them, let's go into PDC. And then for the PDC, I select the PDC filter. And then for the BDC, BDC. All right, and now I can link these two, PDC and BDC. And the order is as such. So if I run a GP update force, and I'll let that run for a second. And then if I run a GP result -R, so here we have the right policy being applied. So the SECNET NTP PDC policy has been applied, which is the correct one. All right, so at the top, we'll link the mandatory policy, and we'll do the order, default domain, then mandatory. And then if I drop down into clients, I will link the desktop policy. I should probably rename this to clients instead of, since it's part of the clients OU and not specifically related to desktop. So maybe I'll rename this to client policy. And then users will go here. And what I'll do is copy and paste. Actually, no, let's delete this. I'm actually going to delete this and move it up to accounts. So link existing user policy. Okay, so that way. If there are more policies that deviate between the admins and the users, what I'll do is I'll split these policies up then, but for now, I'll just use one policy for each. So starting with the PDC policy. So what this policy does is it turns on time. I set the global settings, and then for time provider, I have NTP server selected, and I'm using ntp.secnetwork.org. So I have to actually go create this, and I'll do that now while I'm looking at this. And what I will do for now is create a CNAME for NTP, and I will point that to 0.pool.ntp.org and just to verify that that's correct, if I do an NS lookup on that, I'll get responses. So let's click OK. So now, if I do NS lookup ntp.secnetwork.org, it will point out to the respective time servers. So for this, I enable NTP client and the NTP server, so other clients can leverage this server as an NTP server. So other systems can leverage this as an NTP server. All right, and then the BDC is exactly the same with one difference. It's using it's using NT5DS instead of NTP. All right, so just to quickly go through the rest of these policies. The mandatory policies have most of the security settings detailed out, as well as some cosmetic settings for consistency. So what I'll do is I'll export all of these and post them on the website. It will be linked in the description if you want to go through what policies are set within these different policies. So one thing I have to update real quick before I forget. Alright, I have to remove this policy. Because it still referenced the previous domain that it was built on. So now that that is cleared, I will going to enable it. And that should take effect with the requirements with this server, as opposed to where these policies were originally pulled from. I'm not going to modify trusted publishers, network retrieval, but I am going to turn on revocation. And leave the defaults. And we're good here. So that's been updated. So offline, I'll export all these policies and publish them on the website and link it in the description. Oh, so this is going to be broken until I do a couple group policy updates. And then probably 3 or 4 reboots. Alright, so as you can see, we now have a policy statement. And it's telling me this is the first time this account has logged in. And so now I'm going to generate a password for the built-in administrator account, since we have our own, since I have my own. Actually, our admin account is here. And based on the group policy, it should have been renamed to admin. So we'll cancel this and reset password. now we have UAC enabled. Okay, and then let's do a GP results. And let's see, we have our default domain policy, our mandatory policy, domain controller policy, and then our time NTP policy. And as for our user, mandatory user, and then mandatory. I believe this is a bug. I see this a lot when I build out these policies. All right, so I think, let me actually, before I conclude, let's check our DNS server. And still says standard. So I'm going to manually change this. And then we'll do secure only. While I'm at it, I'm going to turn on scavenging. And let's make sure that this is also set to store an AD. Turn on scavenging here and secure. So it's turned on the zone level. Let me make sure it's turned on at the server level. All right. And we're going to allow DNS to our internal networks. So we're going to jump over the objects, and I'm going to create a group. And I'm going to call this domain controllers. And I'm going to add HQ PDC1. Jump over to policy. And we're going to create a role right here. And we're going to call this SECNET DNS. SECNET DNS. This is going to also be an interzone rule. Our source is going to be our networks. So from AAA, DMZ, management, SEC, serve user and VoIP. And what I'll do here is say SECNET HQ network 10.0.0.0/16. Destination is to AAA domain controllers. And actually this has to be a universal rule. Application will be DNS. Application defaults, and everything else is good. So our first rule, I'm going to commit that. So this concludes our video on deploying a domain controller on Windows Server 2019. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please remember to comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you.